This is quite an important zoonosis. Infection typically occurs through aerosolization. So what we see is that dried fecal material in the environment. Maybe it gets picked up by the wind or dusting in the home, vacuuming for people who have pet birds. And those organisms, those elementary bodies, are inhaled. In people, pneumonia is the most common presentation, and it varies from extremely mild to severe, acute, and fulminant. We also see chlamydia psittaci as a cause of culture-negative endocarditis. So remember, chlamydia are obligate intracellular organisms, and we aren't going to be able to culture them using our standard culture methods. People who are at greatest risk of contracting psittacosis are those with pet birds or people who keep pigeons, veterinarians, zookeepers, farmers, and those working in the poultry industry. Chlamydia abortus is the cause of enzootic abortion of ewes, or EAE. These abortions typically occur in animals without any prior signs and oftentimes occur in the last month of pregnancy. In these animals, we may see infection earlier on in gestation, but it tends to remain latent until 3 to 4 months into the pregnancy. In animals who abort, we see vaginal discharge for up to 3 weeks following abortion. This is something which is not infrequently encountered. In the UK, one study found that 45% of abortions in sheep were associated with chlamydia abortus. In naive flocks, we can see this affect up to 60% of the animals, so outbreaks are certainly possible. We control enzootic abortion by isolating aborting animals and cleaning up those abortuses. We want to prevent environmental contamination and prevent exposure of susceptible animals to that contaminated material. Here you can see a placenta from a sheep which did abort. So we have placentitis and coagulation necrosis associated with chlamydia infection. Chlamydia pneumoniae is a cause of respiratory tract infections, primarily in people. We can see a variety of syndromes, so from upper respiratory tract infections, laryngitis, pharyngitis. People can be febrile and have a headache, and they may or may not go on to develop pneumonia. It's estimated that of those people who are infected with chlamydia pneumonia, 2 to 5% of them have asymptomatic infection, so they don't realize that they actually have the organism. This is a bacteria that affects people of all ages, but is most common in those who are living in crowded settings. So students, people in the military, nursing homes, hospitals, prisons, etc. Chlamydia pneumonia is quite common. It's estimated that in the United States, there's approximately 300,000 cases per year. Chlamydia pneumoniae doesn't just affect people, though. It's actually been reported as a cause of infections in koalas. And these are just some images I took while visiting the state of Victoria in southern Australia. This is a beautiful vista from the Great Ocean Road. And here you can see koalas in their natural environment, sitting up at the branch points in trees and just sort of hanging out and sleeping. I've put a link to a video above, which describes a research project in Queensland to try and develop some vaccinations for koalas against chlamydia infections. What we see in affected koalas can include urinary infections, as well as a really severe and acute conjunctivitis. So in this koala here, you can see we have reddening of the conjunctiva and the skin around the eyes, and perhaps some excess lacrimation, so he's tearing. Chlamydia suis is an organism that's really only recognized in pigs. They are the only known host. It's associated with reproductive and respiratory tract infections, so not so dissimilar from what we see with our other species, conjunctivitis, rhinitis, perhaps pneumonia, and in cases of reproductive disease, return to estrus among females, and inferior semen quality in the boars. The elementary bodies for chlamydia suis can survive in the environment for up to 30 days, and these infections are treated with primarily antimicrobials. Our tetracyclines are really our treatment of choice, followed by potentially the macrolides or fluoroquinolones, of course, depending on the stage of production and local laws around antimicrobial use in agricultural animals. We have no vaccines available for chlamydia suis, and so management really relies on cleaning, other good management practices, and really just reducing environmental reservoirs as much as possible. Chlamydia trachomatis is primarily a human pathogen, although it has in some rare instances actually been isolated from animals as well. This organism causes sexually transmitted infections, Oftentimes we see no overt clinical signs, although it can still be causing some nasty issues. So it can affect the reproductive system, and the damage that it causes can lead to infertility. In people who do have symptoms, most frequently what's seen is burning on urination or perhaps urethral discharge. This organism is also transmitted from mothers to newborns at birth, and in those babies, it can cause conjunctivitis and pneumonia. Fortunately, this is an infection that's readily treatable. Treatment relies on azithromycin and doxycycline. The incidence of chlamydia trachomatis infections in people has been on the rise for the last couple of decades. You can see from back in 1997 all the way up to 2019, it was a fairly steady upwards trajectory. Because this organism is sexually transmitted, it requires really close contact. The pandemic era shutdowns that we saw in 2020 and 2021 really reduced the transmission of this organism as well. So sort of an interesting unintended consequence of these other infection control measures that were in place. When dealing with these infections, for Moraxella, you want to collect swabs of lacrimal secretions. For chlamydia infections, there's many different options. So blood for serology can be really useful. And oftentimes we want to do a paired acute plus convalescent serum to look for an anamnestic response and an increase in the antibody level. In cases of abortion, we can take smears from cotyledons, the placenta, or the vagina, joint fluid from polyarthritis, conjunctival swabs if we have eye infections, or in systemic infections, looking at the lung or abdominal viscera. Culture is possible, although it requires really specialized techniques. And so primarily in research settings, there are some specialized media which have been developed to allow the organism to survive and to kill off contaminants. For Moraxella, it's identified primarily through culture on blood agar, a relatively easy organism to work with. For chlamydia, indirect assays are most commonly done. So ELISA-based methods, serology, we're either looking for the antigen or antibodies to the organism. We can see the organism directly on tissues, so MZN staining, there's PCR-based assays, or as I said, culture, primarily in a research setting, using things like embryonated eggs or cell cultures in order to grow the organism. As a genus, we need to consider chlamydia all to be zoonotic. They generally have a very broad host range, although it does vary by species. Chlamydia psittaci is one of the 10 most commonly encountered laboratory-acquired infections. And so if you suspect this organism, make sure to write that suspicion on your laboratory submission form so that the diagnosticians can protect themselves and make sure to work with samples from your patients in a biosafety cabinet. Chlamydia psittaci has a very broad host range: ruminants, horses, pigs, rodents, wild birds, reptiles, and of course, people are all potentially susceptible. Chlamydia abortus is also a potential zoonosis, and in pregnant women, it can cause abortion. And so for that reason, along with a number of other agents associated with abortion in small ruminants, it's probably a good idea for pregnant women to avoid lambing ewes, particularly when abortions are occurring. Unfortunately, for both of these genera, we lack standardized methods for either determining or interpreting antimicrobial susceptibility. For chlamydia, it's actually impossible because these organisms require cell culture or embryonated eggs, and these are just entirely different culture methods than our standardized susceptibility test methods are. For Moraxella species, we can get a little bit of a hint about intrinsic resistance from those species which infect people. So Moraxella catarrhalis, which causes pink eye in people, is intrinsically resistant to trimethoprim. So when treating cows with Moraxella bovis, probably best to avoid trimethoprim monotherapy. We also know that Moraxella organisms causing infections in people are commonly beta-lactamase producers. So avoiding a beta-lactam or potentially using beta-lactam, beta-lactamase inhibitor combinations would be a rational choice. 2 new terms for today, and then of course, some questions for self-assessment.